I'd been talking to this girl Maya for maybe 3 weeks, before I started noticing things that didn't sit right with me. We met through a mutual friend at a cookout and exchanged numbers. Nothing unusual about that. She was funny, easy to talk to, and I figured it was worth seeing where things went. For the first week or two, everything was pretty normal. Then one afternoon, I mentioned offhand that I was heading to the gym, and about 40 minutes later I got a text saying, "You look tired walking in. Everything okay?" I didn't think much of it at the time. The gym was maybe a 10-minute drive from my apartment. I never told her which one I went to. I chalked it up to coincidence, figured maybe she went to the same place and happened to be there. I didn't bring it up. That was probably my first mistake. Things moved pretty fast after that, which looking back was a pattern I kept missing. She'd reference things I'd done or places I'd been without me ever mentioning them. I'd post nothing on social media, tell her nothing, and she'd say something like, "How was that coffee place on Harmon?" Or, "Did the traffic on 5th bother you this morning?" Each time there was a reasonable explanation I could reach for. She could have driven past. Someone could have mentioned it. I kept reaching. About a month in, I ended things. It wasn't dramatic. We hadn't even officially called it dating, so there wasn't much to end. I just told her I thought we were better as friends. She took it fine on the surface. Too fine, maybe. She just said okay, and that was it. No argument, no follow-up. I remember thinking it went surprisingly smooth. The text started 3 days later. Not threatening, not unhinged, just steady. 1 in the morning, 1 around noon, 1 before bed. Always something ordinary. Hope your day's going well. Did you eat? Saw something that made me think of you. I responded once or twice out of guilt, which I now know was the wrong move. When I stopped responding entirely, the frequency didn't change. It just continued at the same pace, like a clock ticking in another room. That's the part that got to me. There was no escalation, no reaction to my silence. It was like she didn't need a response, like she wasn't waiting for one. About 2 weeks into the silence, I started sleeping with my blinds fully closed. I couldn't explain it rationally. My apartment was on the 2nd floor and faced a quiet side street. There was no reason to feel watched, but somewhere around 1 in the morning, I'd get this feeling like the air in the room had shifted, and I'd lie there staring at the ceiling until it passed. I told myself it was stress. I was in my last semester. Work was picking up. It made sense to be on edge. Then one night, I woke up about 2 a.m. to a sound I couldn't place at first. It was low, rhythmic, almost like breathing but not quite. I sat up and just listened. It stopped. I waited a few minutes, didn't hear it again, and went back to sleep. In the morning, I found a small mark on the outside of my window ledge. It looked like something had been resting against it. A hand maybe, or a forearm. The paint was slightly scraped, like whatever it was had been there long enough to leave something behind. I told myself it could have been anything. The last time I saw her was a Tuesday. I'd gotten home late from a shift, but instead of cutting through the front like I normally would, I came in through the back entrance. There was a construction blocking the usual route, so I looped around and came up the rear stairwell. It was nothing deliberate, just a shortcut that happened to work that night. When I got to my room, I set my bag down, and out of habit, drifted toward the window that faces the front parking lot. There was a car I didn't recognize parked directly across from the building's entrance. Engine off, no lights, just sitting there in a spot that's usually empty because the drain next to it floods when it rains. Nobody parks there. I stood back from the glass so I wouldn't be visible, and just watched. After a few minutes, the driver's door opened. It was Maya. She didn't look up at the building, didn't look around. She walked to the back of her car with this calm, deliberate kind of movement, the way someone moves when they've already made a decision. She opened the trunk, and then just stood there with her back to me. Not rummaging, not shifting things around, just standing, still, for what felt like a long time. Then she reached in and lifted something out. It was long, maybe 3.5 feet, wrapped completely in a bag, the kind with a zipper running the full length. She held it with both hands, one near each end, like she was being careful with it. She closed the trunk with her elbow and then sat down on the back of the car, the bag across her lap, and just waited. She was facing the front entrance of my building. I didn't move. I don't think I breathed properly for the next several minutes. I stood back in the dark of my room and watched her sit there, completely still, the bag resting across her legs, eyes on the door I would have walked through if I hadn't come in from the back that night. After maybe 20 minutes, she stood up, put the bag in the trunk, got in the car, and drove away. I've thought about those 20 minutes every day since. I've thought about what was in that bag, the shape of it, the length, the way she handled it with 2 hands and kept it level, the way she sat facing that entrance like she was expecting someone to walk out, like she was timing something. The text stopped the following morning. No final message, no explanation, just gone. And that's the thing I keep coming back to, the part I genuinely cannot square. She stopped the exact morning after she drove away with whatever was in that bag. Not gradually, not with a final angry message. Just a full stop, like a switch flipping. The only reason I can think of for someone to stop like that, after weeks of clockwork contact, is that something changed. Either what she was planning didn't happen the way she intended, or she realized something that night that made her reconsider. I don't know if that's why I'm still here. I don't know if that's too dramatic a conclusion to draw from a woman sitting on her car with a bag. But I know what I saw, and I know the shape of that bag, and I know she was waiting for someone who she thought hadn't come home yet. I moved out 6 weeks later. I didn't tell anyone the real reason. I still don't take the front entrance at night. I don't know if that's paranoia, or just sense at this point. Probably some of both. I just know I'm glad I took the shortcut. I don't smoke. Neither does my roommate, Diane. So when I came home one afternoon and the apartment smelled faintly like cigarettes, I just kind of stood there for a second, sniffing the air. Diane was at work. I'd been out all morning running errands. I figured maybe a neighbor had been smoking in the hallway and somehow it drifted under the door. Our building is old. The ventilation is garbage. I cracked a window and forgot about it. Diane was barely home that month anyway, always at her boyfriend's. She wouldn't have noticed either. That was probably my first mistake. Some context. I had ended a 2-year relationship with a guy named Marcus about a month before this. Nothing explosive, no big blowout. I just realized one day I'd spent most of those 2 years walking on eggshells, and the relief I felt when I pictured my life without him was answer enough. He didn't take it well, but he didn't make a scene either. He just went quiet in this very deliberate way that, in hindsight, I should have paid more attention to. We hadn't had any contact since. I kept things clean. No follow-up texts, no checking his social media. I'd moved into a new apartment with Diane 2 weeks after the breakup, so he didn't even have my address. Or so I thought. I must have gotten careless at some point. Maybe he followed me once. Maybe he saw me moving. I'll never know. The first thing was the cigarette smell. Marcus smoked. I always hated it. The second thing happened maybe a week later. I got home from work and went to put my keys on the hook by the door, same as always. And I noticed my spare key wasn't there. I keep the spare on the hook just out of habit. It's been there since the day I moved in. I tore through the apartment looking for it. Coat pockets, bathroom shelf, the kitchen drawer where I throw everything I don't know what to do with. Nothing. I texted Diane. She said she hadn't touched it. I told myself I must have moved it somewhere and forgotten. I searched the whole apartment but couldn't find it. Eventually I gave up, ordered a replacement from the hardware store. I didn't think about it again for a while. About 2 weeks later, I started noticing that things in my bedroom were slightly off. Not in a dramatic way. It was more like the feeling you get when you come back from a trip and something in your room looks different, but you can't put your finger on it. The first time I noticed it, the charger on my nightstand was on the wrong side. I'm left-handed, so I always keep it on the left. It was on the right. I moved it back. I assumed I'd done it in the dark while half asleep. The second time, the book on my nightstand was face down while I always leave it face up. Small things, dismissible things. But then one evening I opened my closet to grab a jacket, and the clothes were hanging in a different order than I leave them. I keep everything organized. Jackets on the left, then sweaters, then everything else. That evening the jackets were in the middle. I stood in front of that closet for a long time. I didn't say anything to Diane. I didn't want to sound paranoid. The thing that finally made me say something out loud happened on a Thursday night. I was taking a shower and I heard the bathroom door handle move. Not open, just move. The way it does when someone grips it from the outside and then stops. I called out Diane's name. No answer. I turned off the water and stood there in the tub just listening. Nothing. When I got out, I opened the door and the hallway was empty. I checked the apartment. Diane wasn't home. She texted me earlier that she was staying at her boyfriend's. I was alone. I checked every room, every closet, under the beds. Nothing. I deadbolted the front door and sat on the couch with my phone in my hand for about an hour trying to talk myself down. Old building, I told myself. The pipes make sounds. The handles rattle sometimes. The walls are thin and sound carries from the neighboring unit. No cameras in the building. No security. Just an open front door that anyone could walk through. I almost believed myself. A few nights later, I woke up at around 3 a.m. Probably a bad dream. I lay there in the dark for a minute, and that's when I registered the smell. Faint, but there. Cigarettes. I sat up slowly. My eyes adjusted enough that I could make out the shapes in my room. The dresser, the desk, the chair in the corner. I stared at the chair because something about it looked different. It took me a few seconds to understand why. There were clothes draped over the back of it. A shirt, something dark bunched on top. The kind of pile that in the dark, at 3 a.m., with your heart already hammering, Looks exactly like a person sitting very still. I don't remember leaving clothes in that chair. I never leave clothes in that chair. My brain assembled the shape before I could stop it. Shoulders, a torso, the suggestion of a head. I sat frozen, staring at it, telling myself it was nothing. Just fabric, just shadows filling in the gaps. I turned on the lamp. Marcus was sitting in the chair. He didn't move. He just looked at me, his hands resting on his knees, his expression almost calm. The way he used to look when he was waiting for me to stop talking so he could say what he'd already decided to say. The jacket was his, the dark boxy one he'd had for years. He was wearing it. "What are you doing here?" My voice came out smaller than I wanted it to. He tilted his head slightly. "You stopped answering my calls," he said, like that was a complete explanation, like that made any of this reasonable. "I just wanted to make sure you were okay, that you were safe." I couldn't speak for a moment. Safe. The word landed somewhere wrong. "How did you get in?" I asked. He shrugged like it was nothing. "The main door to the building was open. It's always open. I just walked in." He paused. "And your spare key was right there on the hook, so I borrowed it. I was always going to tell you." Borrowed. Like it was the most normal thing in the world. Like none of this was what it was. That first afternoon, the cigarette smell, Diane at work, me out all morning. He must have walked into the building through an unsecured front door and let himself into my apartment. The spare key had been sitting right there on the hook. He'd taken it, had a duplicate cut, and came back to return the original. The extra key on the hook that final morning. I don't know how many times he had let himself in before that night. I don't know how long he had been sitting in that chair in the dark watching me sleep. I reported him the next morning, filed everything, the key, the entries, the night I found him sitting in my room. They went to Marcus's apartment 2 days later. He was gone. His landlord said he'd cleared out fast, left furniture behind, no forwarding address. They told me there was a warrant out, that I should contact them if I heard from him. I changed the locks that same day. I told Diane everything. I started sleeping with the light on. Somewhere out there, Marcus is running from the consequence. From the version of himself he became when I stopped letting him control the story. I don't know which thought keeps me up more at night. That he's out there somewhere else, or that some part of him still believes he did nothing wrong. I met Daniel at a ceramics class I only signed up for because my therapist said I needed a hobby. He was the kind of person who made everyone in the room feel like they were the only one in it. We dated for about 2 years. The first year was genuinely one of the best of my life. I don't talk about the second year much. After we ended things, I moved to a different city for work. Fresh start, new apartment, all that. The first few weeks were quiet in a good way. I was sleeping through the night, eating actual meals, calling my mom back. I felt like myself again for the first time in a long time. Then I noticed the mug. It was sitting on my kitchen counter, maybe 3 weeks after I moved in. Just a plain white mug with a small chip on the handle. I didn't own it, or at least I didn't think I did. I figured it must have gotten mixed into my boxes somehow, maybe grabbed by accident from Daniel's place, and I just hadn't noticed it until now. I put it in the cabinet and didn't think about it again. That was the first thing. About 6 weeks in, I ran into my downstairs neighbor in the hallway, older woman, friendly enough. She'd mentioned she'd seen my boyfriend the other week, said he seemed nice. I told her I didn't have a boyfriend. I moved here alone. She looked a little embarrassed and said she must have mixed me up with someone else. I believed her. Buildings have a lot of tenants. People get confused. I didn't think about it again until I was lying in bed that night. And then I thought about it for about 3 more hours before I finally fell asleep. I got a job in the city through a recruiter I'd found online. I had never mentioned it to Daniel. He didn't know my new address, my new number, or where I was working. I was careful about it. Not paranoid, just careful. There's a difference. 3 months in, I got a card in my mailbox. No envelope, just a card, folded once, with my name written on the front in handwriting I recognized immediately. Inside it said, "Congratulations on the new job. You always work too hard for too little." That was it. Nothing else. No name, no return address. I stood there in the lobby for probably 5 minutes just staring at it. My first thought was that he must have talked to someone we knew in common. My second thought was that I hadn't told anyone in common where I worked. My third thought was that I needed to sit down. I called my sister that night. She swore she hadn't told him anything. I believed her. I still do, which is the part that bothers me. I started being more deliberate. I closed all my blinds at night. I got a different mail slot, one inside the building manager's office that required a key. I told myself I was being proactive, not reactive. For about 2 months, nothing happened. I started to relax. Then I came home from the grocery store on a Tuesday evening and found my welcome mat moved. I know how that sounds. It's a welcome mat. It's not a big deal. Except for the fact I'm someone who straightens picture frames that are off by a millimeter. I knew exactly where that mat sat at. It had been rotated slightly, maybe 15 degrees, and pushed about 4 inches closer to the door. I went inside and checked every room. Nothing was missing. Nothing was out of place. The windows and locks were all fine. I called the building manager and asked if anyone had been on our floor. He checked the entry log and said no guests had buzzed in that day. I didn't sleep much that night. The mat thing could have been the cleaning crew. It could have been a neighbor bumping it by accident. I told myself both of those things and almost convinced myself. Almost. The last thing happened on a Sunday morning. I was going through some boxes I still hadn't unpacked. One of them was from my old apartment. Stuff I'd thrown in at the last minute. Books, a few picture frames, some random kitchen things. And at the bottom, wrapped in a dish towel, was a small ceramic bowl. Lopsided, uneven glaze, clearly handmade. I made it in that ceramics class. I left it at Daniel's place intentionally, because I didn't want to take anything that would remind me of him. I sat on the floor with it for a long time. I know what you're thinking, and I thought it too. I must have packed it without realizing. I must have grabbed it by accident on one of my last trips out. It was possible. People do that. Breakups are chaotic and exhausting and you're not thinking clearly. But then I noticed the note inside it. Just a small strip of paper, the kind you tear from the bottom of a notepad. And on it, in his handwriting, were 7 words. I just wanted you to have it. I've gone over it 100 times. There's an explanation where none of this is what it looks like. The card could have been forwarded by someone who meant well. The mat could have been nothing. The bowl I could have packed myself without remembering. The note could have been something you put there a long time ago, back when we were still together. And I only found it now. There's an explanation where I'm just someone who never fully unpacked, in more ways than one. I'm still not sure which version I believe.